I never thought the son I raised, the boy I rocked to sleep and cheered for at every baseball game, would one day look me in the eye and call me useless. I never imagined he'd throw me out of his home like trash on collection day. But when I glanced back at that garage as I stood on the curb with my single suitcase, I saw something through the window that changed everything. What I discovered in those shadows would expose a betrayal so deep, it would shake our entire family to its core. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. My name is Margaret Daniels, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 67 years old, and 6 months ago I buried my husband of 43 years. Robert was my everything, my high school sweetheart. My best friend, the father of my 3 children. When the cancer took him, it took a piece of me too. After the funeral, my oldest son David insisted I move in with him and his family. "Mom, you can't stay in that big house alone," he'd said, gripping my shoulders with what I thought was concern. "Dad would want us to take care of you. Come stay with us. We have plenty of room." I was grieving, lost, and frightened of the silence that filled every corner of the home Robert and I had shared. So I agreed. I sold most of my furniture, packed up my life into boxes, and moved into David's spacious suburban home with him, his wife Vanessa, and their 2 teenagers. At first, it seemed like the right decision. I helped around the house, cooked meals the way David remembered from childhood, and watched my grandchildren when they needed me. I thought I was contributing, being useful, earning my place in their home. But slowly things changed. It started with small comments. Vanessa would sigh when I rearranged the kitchen cabinets. "Margaret, we have a system here," she'd say with that tight smile of hers. David would come home from work and barely acknowledge me, heading straight to his home office and closing the door. Then the comments became sharper. "Mum, we eat dinner at 6:30, not 6. You're throwing off the whole schedule." Or, "Can you not leave your reading glasses on the coffee table? This isn't your house." That last one stung. Because it was true, it wasn't my house, I was a guest. No, I was less than a guest. Guests get treated with courtesy. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in late October. I'd spent the afternoon making pot roast, Robert's favorite recipe, the one David used to request for every birthday. I set the table carefully, put out fresh flowers from the garden, and even baked an apple pie. When David came home, Vanessa was right behind him, clicking across the marble foyer in her high heels. They were arguing about something. I heard my name mentioned but couldn't make out the words. I called them to dinner, my voice cheerful, hoping the meal would lift everyone's spirits. David took one look at the spread and his face darkened. "Mom, I told you we're watching our carbs."
"I can't eat any of this."
"Oh, I'm sorry, honey. I didn't know. I can make you something else." "That's exactly the problem." He slammed his briefcase down on the counter. "You don't know. You don't listen. You just do whatever you want in our house, making messes, wasting money on food nobody asked for." Tears pricked my eyes. "David, I was just trying to what? To be useful." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Mom, let's be honest. You're not useful, you're a burden. All you do is get in the way." The words hit me like a physical blow. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. Vanessa stood behind him, arms crossed, saying nothing, not defending me, not telling her husband he was being cruel to his widowed mother, just watching. "David, please," I whispered. "I lost your father."
"Your best isn't good enough."
His face was red now, veins standing out on his neck. "Dad's been gone 6 months, Mom." "6 months? You need to get your act together and stop moping around here like some helpless victim." Something inside me cracked. "Your father died, David. The man I loved for over 40 years died. I'm sorry if my grief inconveniences you." That's when he said it. The words I'll never forget. "You're useless. Completely useless. I don't know why we even agreed to let you stay here." He walked toward me, and I instinctively stepped back. "I want you out. Pack your things and leave. Tonight." I stood there, frozen, unable to believe this was happening. This was my son. My baby boy who I'd nursed through fevers, who I'd taught to ride a bike, who I'd sent off to college with homemade cookies every month. "David, you don't mean that," I said, my voice breaking. "I absolutely mean it." "Get out." Vanessa finally spoke, her voice cold and measured. There's no need to be dramatic about this, Margaret. David's right. This arrangement isn't working. You should find your own place. We'll give you tonight to pack. My hands were shaking as I turned and walked toward the guest room that had been mine for the past 6 months. Behind me, I heard them talking in low voices, but I couldn't make out the words over the rushing sound in my ears. I pulled my old suitcase from the closet and started throwing clothes into it. My vision was blurred with tears, my movements mechanical. How had it come to this? Where had I gone wrong? An hour later, I stood on the front porch with my suitcase, my purse, and a small box of personal items. That was it. That was all I had left of my life. David had called me an Uber. He couldn't even drive his own mother wherever she was going. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me like I was a problem finally being solved. Where am I supposed to go? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. That's not my concern anymore, Mom. You're an adult. Figure it out. The Uber pulled up. As I struggled to lift my suitcase, neither David nor Vanessa moved to help. The driver, a young man with kind eyes, hurried out to assist me. As I reached the car, I looked back one more time at the house, at the life I thought I'd have with my family, and that's when I saw it. The garage door was open just a crack. David must have forgotten to close it all the way when he came home. Through that narrow opening, illuminated by the overhead light, I could see stacks of boxes. Familiar boxes, boxes I recognized. They were labeled in Robert's handwriting. Our boxes. From our house. But David had told me all those boxes had been donated, that there was nothing worth keeping, that he'd handled everything. So why were they in his garage? Mum, the Uber driver said gently. Are you ready? I tore my eyes away from the garage and got into the car. But as we pulled away, my mind was racing. What else had David lied about? The Uber driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror as we pulled away from David's house. Where to, ma'am? Where to? Such a simple question. I had nowhere to go. Just drive for a minute, please, I managed to say. I need to think. He nodded kindly and didn't press me. We drove through the quiet suburban streets as darkness settled over the neighborhood. Through the window, I could see families in their lit-up homes, sitting down to dinner, living their normal lives. I felt like a ghost, watching a world I no longer belonged to. I thought about calling my daughter, Lisa, who lived 3 hours away in Chicago, but she was 7 months pregnant with her first child and dealing with complications. I couldn't burden her with this. My youngest, Tom, was stationed overseas with the Navy. He wouldn't be back for another 4 months. I had some friends from my old neighborhood, but after Robert died and I moved in with David, I'd lost touch with most of them. I was too embarrassed to call them now, to admit that my own son had thrown me out. Ma'am. The driver's voice was gentle. I don't mean to rush you, but I need to know where we're going. I took a shaky breath and pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts, looking for anywhere I could go at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night. That's when I saw her name. Emma Martinez. My old neighbor from the house I'd shared with Robert. We'd been friendly. She'd brought over casseroles after Robert died, and we'd had coffee a few times. But I hadn't spoken to her since the move. With trembling fingers, I dialed her number. It rang 3 times before she answered. Hello, Emma, it's Maggie. Maggie Daniels, I'm sorry to call so late, but My voice broke. I need help. There was no hesitation in her response. Where are you, Maggie? 20 minutes later, the Uber pulled up in front of Emma's modest townhouse. She was already standing on the porch, the light behind her making her look like an angel. When I got out of the car, she rushed down the steps and wrapped me in a hug before I could say a word. Come inside, she said firmly. Let's get you settled. Emma's home was warm and welcoming, filled with family photos and colorful artwork. She led me to her guest room, which was small but cozy, with a handmade quilt on the bed and soft yellow curtains. You stay here as long as you need, she said. No arguments. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself cry. Not quiet, dignified tears, but loud, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. Emma sat beside me and held my hand, saying nothing, just being present. When I finally calmed down enough to speak, I told her everything. About moving in with David, about how the treatment had slowly gotten worse, about tonight's confrontation and the cruel words he'd used. Emma's face grew darker with each detail. Maggie, what your son did. That's not just being mean. That's elder abuse. I shook my head. No, David wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Verbally abuse you. Kick you out with nowhere to go. Make you feel worthless. Emma's voice was kind but firm. Maggie, I'm a social worker. I see this all the time. And it often comes from the people we least expect. Our own children. The words hung in the air. Elder abuse. It sounded so harsh, so official. But wasn't that exactly what had happened? There's something else, I said quietly. I told her about the boxes I'd seen in the garage, the ones David claimed had been donated. Emma's expression grew serious. What was in those boxes? I don't know. All of Robert's things from his office, his papers, documents. David said he'd gone through everything and there was nothing important. I paused. But why would he lie about donating them if there was nothing to hide? That's a very good question. Emma stood up. Are you hungry? When was the last time you ate? I realized I hadn't touched the pot roast I'd made. I'd been too upset. This morning, I think. Come on, I made chicken soup earlier. You need to eat something. We sat at her small kitchen table, and she ladled soup into bowls. As I ate, I felt some strength returning to my body, though my heart still ached. Emma, I said quietly, what am I going to do? I have nowhere to live. I don't have much money, just my social security and a small savings account. I can't afford rent in this area. First things first, Emma said. Tomorrow we're going to make some calls. We need to find out exactly what your financial situation is. When Robert died, there must have been insurance, assets, the house you sold. Where did all that money go? I frowned, trying to remember. David handled all of that. He said there were debts, medical bills from Robert's cancer treatment. He said after everything was settled, there wasn't much left. He set up an account for me with what remained. About $15,000. Emma set down her spoon. Maggie, you owned your home outright, didn't you? Yes. Robert paid off the mortgage 10 years ago. And what did the house sell for? I don't actually know. David handled the sale. It happened so fast after the funeral. He said it was better to sell quickly, that the market was good. Emma was quiet for a moment, and I could see her mind working. Maggie, I don't want to upset you further, but something doesn't add up. A house in your old neighborhood, mortgage-free, would sell for at least $400,000 or $500,000. Even with medical bills, you should have significantly more than $15,000. The soup suddenly felt heavy in my stomach. Are you saying David took the money? I'm saying we need to find out where the money went. And those boxes in his garage might have the answers. I spent that night in Emma's guest room, lying awake and staring at the ceiling. My mind kept replaying the past 6 months, looking for signs I'd missed. How many times had David pushed papers in front of me to sign? How many times had he told me not to worry about the details, that he was handling everything? I'd trusted him. He was my son. You're supposed to be able to trust your children, but Emma's questions had planted a seed of doubt that was rapidly growing into certainty. Something was very wrong. And those boxes in David's garage held the key. The next morning, Emma made me breakfast and then sat down with a notepad. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We need to get copies of all the paperwork from Robert's estate. The will, the house sale documents, insurance policies, everything. David has all of that, I said. Then we'll get them another way. We can request copies from the county clerk's office, the insurance companies, and the bank. It might take some time, but we'll get to the bottom of this. There was a determination in Emma's voice that gave me courage. Someone believed me. Someone was on my side. Why are you helping me? I asked. You barely know me? Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Because this is what I do, Maggie, and because no one should have to go through what you're going through, especially not from their own child. As we made our list of calls to make and documents to request, I thought about David, about the little boy who used to climb into my lap for bedtime stories, who'd made me Mother's Day cards covered in glitter and crooked hearts. When had he changed? Or had he always been capable of this, and I'd just been too blind to see it? Either way, I was done being the helpless victim he thought I was. I was done being useless. It was time to find out the truth. Over the next 3 days, Emma and I made calls. So many calls. To the county clerk's office, to Robert's life insurance company, to the bank where we'd had our accounts for 30 years, to the real estate agent who'd sold our house. Each conversation revealed another piece of the puzzle, and each piece made my stomach turn. The house had sold for $475,000. Not the barely 300 David had mentioned in passing. Robert's life insurance policy had paid out $200,000. David had told me there was no life insurance. Our joint savings account had contained another $90,000 when Robert died. I'd signed papers to close it. Papers David assured me were just formalities to settle the estate. I sat at Emma's kitchen table, staring at the numbers we'd written down. Over $750,000, and I'd been left with $15,000 and told to be grateful. That's not all, Emma said quietly. She slid another paper across the table. I have a friend at the county assessor's office. She did some digging. 3 months ago, David transferred ownership of a commercial property into his name. According to the records, it was previously owned by the Robert Daniels Family Trust. My hands were shaking as I picked up the paper. It was a small strip mall, 6 units. Robert had bought it 20 years ago as an investment. The rental income had helped put our kids through college. I didn't even know this existed anymore, I whispered. Robert managed all of this. After he got sick, David said the property had to be sold to pay medical bills. It wasn't sold, Maggie, it was transferred to David. The property is currently valued at around $300,000, and it generates about $4,000 a month in rental income. I felt dizzy. The room seemed to tilt around me. How could he do this? The words came out as barely a whisper. I'm his mother. Emma's expression was a mixture of anger and sadness. Money makes people do terrible things, even to the people they should love most. I thought about my other children. Does Lisa know? Does Tom? I don't know. But I think we need to tell them what we've found. That evening, I called Lisa. My hands were trembling so badly that Emma had to dial the number for me. Mom. Lisa's voice was bright and cheerful. I've been meaning to call you. How are things with David? Are you settling in okay? The innocence in her voice broke my heart. She had no idea. Lisa, sweetheart, I need to tell you something. And I need you to just listen, okay? I told her everything. About the way David had treated me, about being thrown out, about the money that had disappeared. With each revelation, I could hear her breathing change on the other end of the line. When I finished, there was a long silence. Mum. Lisa finally said, her voice tight with emotion. Where are you right now? Are you safe? I'm staying with Emma Martinez, our old neighbor. I'm fine, honey. But Lisa, did David tell you anything about Dad's estate? Did he say anything about the house sale or the insurance? Another pause. He told me and Tom that everything went to medical bills and funeral expenses. He said you'd have just enough to live on if you were careful. He made it sound like you were practically broke. He lied to you too? That son of a... Lisa caught herself. I'm coming down there. Mark can handle things here for a few days. You shouldn't be dealing with this alone. You're 7 months pregnant, sweetheart. You can't. Mom, my brother stole from you. From all of us. Dad set up that trust for the whole family. I'm coming down there, and we're going to figure this out together. After we hung up, I tried to reach Tom, but the time zones made it difficult. I left him a message asking him to call me at Emma's number as soon as he could. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those boxes in David's garage. Emma had suggested we needed to get our hands on the actual documents, the will, the trust papers, everything. But how? I couldn't just walk into David's house and demand them. And I certainly couldn't break in. Or could I? The thought came to me around 2 in the morning. I still had a key to David's house. In the chaos of being thrown out, I'd forgotten to leave it behind, and he hadn't asked for it back. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. David and Vanessa both worked during the day. The kids were in school. On weekday afternoons, the house was empty for at least 2 hours. It was risky. It might even be illegal, though I reasoned that these were my own documents, my own husband's papers. But it was a chance to get the proof I needed. The next morning at breakfast, I told Emma what I was thinking. She set down her coffee mug slowly. Maggie, I can't advise you to do that. If David came home and found you there, or if the neighbors called the police. I know. But Emma, those boxes have everything we need. The original will, the trust documents, maybe even proof of what David did. Without them, it's just our word against his. Emma was quiet for a long moment. If you're going to do this, you need to be smart about it. You get in, find what you need. Take photos of everything with your phone and get out. 15 minutes maximum. And Maggie. She looked me straight in the eye. If anything feels wrong, if you hear a car, anything, you leave immediately. Your safety is more important than any document. Will you come with me? She shook her head. I can't. If something goes wrong, I could lose my license as a social worker. But I'll wait nearby, I'll be your getaway driver. We both laughed nervously at that. But the humor did nothing to settle my churning stomach. The next afternoon, Lisa arrived. She was enormous with pregnancy, her face swollen and tired from the 3-hour drive. When she saw me, she burst into tears and hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have visited more. I should have checked on you. This isn't your fault, sweetheart. David called me last night, she said, pulling back. He wanted to know if I'd heard from you. He said you'd stormed out after an argument and that he was worried about you. I felt a flash of anger. Even now, David was trying to control the narrative, to make himself look like the concerned son. What did you tell him? I told him I knew the truth about the money. I told him he should be ashamed of himself. Lisa's eyes were fierce. He hung up on me. Over coffee, I explained my plan to Lisa. She listened, her hand unconsciously resting on her pregnant belly. I'm coming with you, she said when I finished. Absolutely not. You're 7 months pregnant. Exactly. Which means if David does show up, I can distract him while you get out. What's he going to do? Arrest his pregnant sister? Emma shook her head. This is a terrible idea. You both know that, right? Terrible ideas seem to be a family specialty, Lisa said grimly. When do we leave? We decided to go the next day, Wednesday afternoon at 1 o'clock. David had a standing meeting with investors every Wednesday that lasted at least 2 hours. Vanessa worked until 5. The kids wouldn't be home until 3:30 at the earliest. That gave us a window. A small, terrifying window. That night I lay in Emma's guest room, staring at the ceiling again. Tomorrow I would walk back into the house where I'd been called useless and thrown out. Tomorrow I would find out exactly how deep David's betrayal went. And tomorrow I would stop being a victim and start fighting back. Wednesday morning felt like the longest morning of my life. Emma made pancakes, but I could barely eat. Lisa paced around the small living room, one hand on her lower back, the other checking her phone obsessively. David texted me again, she said. He wants to know where Mom is staying. He says he may have overreacted and wants to talk. I looked up from my untouched breakfast. What did you say? Nothing. I'm not responding. Lisa's jaw was set in a way that reminded me of Robert when he was angry. He doesn't get to throw you out and then decide when it's convenient to make peace. At 12:30, we got into Emma's car. Emma drove, Lisa sat in the passenger seat, and I was in the back, clutching my old house key so tightly it left an imprint on my palm. Remember the plan? Emma said as we pulled onto David's street. Get in, go straight to the garage, take photos of every document you can find. 15 minutes maximum. What if the boxes are locked? Lisa asked. Then we improvise, I said, though I had no idea what that meant. Emma parked 2 houses down under the shade of a large oak tree. From here we could see David's driveway and front door. The house looked quiet, peaceful. You'd never know what darkness lived inside those walls. It's 1 o'clock, Emma said. His meeting should have just started. I took a deep breath and opened the car door. Lisa started to follow, but I held up my hand. Stay here. If something goes wrong, you need to be ready to call for help, and you're too pregnant to run if we need to. For once. Lisa didn't argue. She just squeezed my hand and said, Be careful, Mom. Walking up that driveway felt surreal. Just 5 days ago I'd stood here with my suitcase broken and defeated. Now I was walking back in uninvited, to reclaim what was mine. The key still worked. I slipped inside, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The house was silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. The clock that had belonged to Robert's parents. Another thing David had taken. I moved quickly through the kitchen and toward the door that led to the garage. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The garage was dim, lit only by a small window. And there they were, stacks and stacks of boxes, labeled in Robert's neat handwriting. Office files 2023, legal documents, financial records, personal papers, all the things David said had been donated, all the things he'd told me weren't important. I pulled out my phone and started with the box labeled legal documents. Inside were folders, and my hands trembled as I opened the first one. Robert's will. The original, not a copy. I photographed each page, making sure the text was clear. The will was straightforward. Everything was to be divided equally among me and our 3 children, with me inheriting the house and the right to live there for as long as I wanted. There was a codicil about the commercial property. It was to remain in a family trust, with the income split 4 ways. None of this had happened. None of it. I moved to the next folder. The trust documents for the commercial property. More photos. Then the house sale documents. I photographed those too, noting the sale price of $475,000. I found Robert's life insurance policy. $200,000, payable to me as the sole beneficiary. I found bank statements showing the $90,000 in our savings account. And then I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a stack of documents with my signature on them. But I didn't remember signing half of these. Power of attorney forms, giving David complete control over my finances, quitclaim deeds, transfer papers for the commercial property. My signature looked right, but something felt wrong. I photographed everything, my hands shaking harder now. At the bottom of the box, I found a folder labeled Mom's Care. Curious, I opened it. Inside were brochures for nursing homes, not nice assisted living facilities, but state-run institutions with terrible online reviews. There were notes in David's handwriting, long-term placement options, costs covered by Medicaid after assets depleted. He'd been planning this, planning to put me in a home and take everything. I heard my phone buzz. A text from Lisa, 10 minutes. How's it going? I quickly moved to the next box labeled Financial Records. More bank statements, more transfers I'd never authorized. Evidence of David systematically draining accounts, moving money, covering his tracks. My phone buzzed again. Mum, a car just turned onto the street, Silver said. Not David's car, but I don't recognize it. My heart leaped into my throat. I started shoving folders back into boxes, trying to remember exactly how they'd been arranged. Another text. False alarm. But you need to hurry. I grabbed one more box. This one labeled Personal Papers. Inside were letters, love letters I'd written to Robert during his deployment to Vietnam, photos from our wedding, baby pictures of the kids. And beneath those, I found a letter in Robert's handwriting, dated 2 months before he died. It was addressed to me. My dearest Maggie. It began. I didn't have time to read it, and saw it continued for several more pages. I photographed them all, tears blurring my vision. Mom. Lisa's text was in all caps. David's car. He's coming down the street. Panic surged through me. I shoved everything back into the boxes, not caring any more about the order. I closed the box lids and ran for the door, but as I reached for the handle I heard it. The garage door opener activating. David was pulling into the garage. I was trapped. My mind raced. If he found me here, he could call the police. He could accuse me of breaking and entering, of trespassing. All the evidence I'd just gathered would be meaningless if I was arrested. The garage door was rising. I could see the front of David's Mercedes appearing in the opening. There was only one option. I ducked behind the boxes, pressing myself into the corner as tightly as I could. The concrete wall was cold against my back. I held my breath as David's car pulled fully into the garage. The engine cut off. The car door opened. I heard David's footsteps, heard him humming something under his breath. He walked right past my hiding spot, just feet away, and opened the door to the house. The moment he was inside, I moved. I squeezed out from behind the boxes and ran in a crouch toward the still open garage door. I could hear David moving around inside the house. Any second, he might come back. I slipped under the garage door just as it started to close. I didn't run. Running would draw attention from the neighbors. Instead, I walked as quickly as I could down the driveway, my legs shaking, my heart racing. Emma's car was pulling up to the curb. Lisa threw open the back door and I dove inside. Drive. I gasped. Just drive. Emma pulled away smoothly, not speeding, not drawing attention. Just a normal car on a normal street on a normal Wednesday afternoon. It wasn't until we were 3 blocks away that I started to cry. Not sad tears this time, but tears of relief mixed with rage. Did you get what you needed? Emma asked, her eyes on the rearview mirror. I held up my phone, where hundreds of photos were stored. I got everything. Lisa reached back and grabbed my hand. You did it, Mom. You actually did it. But I was thinking about David, walking past those boxes, humming to himself. completely unaware that his carefully constructed lies were about to come crashing down. And I was thinking about Robert's letter, the one I hadn't had time to read. What had he wanted to tell me? What had he known before he died? Back at Emma's house, I finally opened the photos of Robert's letter. Lisa and Emma sat beside me on the couch as I read it aloud, my voice breaking. My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I had to leave you. I'm sorry for so many things. I need to tell you something about David. Something I should have told you years ago, but I was too proud, too ashamed. About 3 years ago, David came to me with a business proposition. He needed money for a real estate development deal. He asked to borrow $200,000. I said no. I told him the money we had was for our retirement, for emergencies, for our future. He was furious. He said terrible things. That I'd always favored Lisa and Tom, that I never believed in him, that I was selfish. We didn't speak for 6 months. It broke my heart, Maggie. You tried so hard to fix things between us, but the damage was done. When I got sick, David came back. He apologized. He said he'd been wrong, that he wanted to make things right. He helped with doctor appointments, with paperwork, with everything. I thought we'd finally healed. But last week, I overheard him on the phone. He was talking to someone about securing the assets and making sure everything's in place. When he saw me listening, he said he was just trying to help, making sure you'd be taken care of after I was gone. But Maggie, I don't trust him. I've changed my will, created a trust for the commercial property, made sure everything is documented and clear. I've left copies of everything with my attorney, Harold Brennan. If anything seems wrong after I'm gone, go to Harold. He knows everything. I'm scared, Maggie. Scared that my own son might try to take advantage of you when I'm not here to protect you. Please promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll stand up for yourself. You're the strongest woman I've ever known, even if you don't see it yourself. You raised 3 children. You've stood by me through thick and thin. You've weathered every storm with grace. Don't let David make you feel small. Don't let anyone make you feel useless. You are worth so much more than you know. I love you. I've loved you since the day we met, and I'll love you beyond this life. You're Robert. When I finished reading, Lisa was crying openly. Emma had her hand over her mouth. He knew. I whispered. Robert knew what David would do. Who's Harold Brennan? Emma asked quietly. Robert's attorney. They went to law school together, stayed friends for 40 years. I looked up, something hardening inside me. And David never mentioned him, never told me to contact him. Never said anything about Robert leaving papers with him. Lisa's phone rang. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. Don't answer it, I said. No, I think I should. She put it on speaker. Lisa? David's voice was tight, stressed. Lisa, I need to know where Mom is. This has gone on long enough. She's being irrational, and I'm worried about her. Worried about her? Lisa's voice was ice. You threw her out, David. You called her useless. That's not. Look, we had an argument. I said some things I regret. But she's our mother, and she's not thinking clearly. I need to make sure she's okay. She's better than okay. She's safe. Which is more than I can say about her money. Silence on the other end. Then, carefully. What are you talking about? I'm talking about Dad's estate. I'm talking about the house sale, the insurance, the commercial property. Should I keep going? Lisa, you don't understand. The medical bills. We have the documents, David. We know what you did. Another long silence. When David spoke again, his voice had changed. It was harder, colder. You need to be very careful about what you're accusing me of, little sister. Very careful. Is that a threat? It's advice. Mom signed over power of attorney. Everything I did was legal. If she has a problem with how I managed her affairs, she can take it up with a lawyer. But I promise you, it won't end the way you think. We'll see about that, Lisa said and ended the call. She looked at me, her face determined. Tomorrow, we're going to see Harold Brennan, and then we're going to make David answer for what he did. I nodded, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not hope exactly, but purpose. Direction. Robert had tried to warn me. He'd tried to protect me. Now it was time for me to protect myself, and to make sure David faced the consequences of what he'd done to our family. Harold Brennan's law office was in a historic building downtown, the kind with marble floors and dark wood paneling that spoke of old money and established trust. As Emma, Lisa, and I rode the elevator to the 3rd floor, I clutched my purse containing my phone with all the photographs. Do you think he'll remember you? Lisa asked. I haven't seen Harold since the funeral, I said, but he and Robert were close. He gave a beautiful eulogy. The elevator doors opened, and we walked down a quiet hallway to a door with a brass nameplate Harold Brennan, attorney at law. The receptionist, a kind-looking woman in her 50s, smiled as we entered. Mrs. Daniels, Mr. Brennan is expecting you. Please go right in. Harold stood as we entered his office. He was in his mid-70s, with white hair and sharp blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. But it was the expression on his face when he saw me that caught my attention. A mixture of relief and something like anger. Maggie, he said, coming around his desk to take my hands. My God, I've been trying to reach you for months. Your son told me you'd moved and didn't want to be disturbed, that you'd call me when you were ready. The words hit me like a punch. David told you that. He said you were grieving, that you needed space. Harold's face darkened. But I knew something was wrong. Robert made me promise to look after you, and I've been going crazy not knowing if you were okay. I introduced Lisa and Emma, and we all sat down. Harold's office was lined with law books, and on his desk was a photo of him and Robert from their law school days, young and smiling. Harold, I need to know what Robert left with you, I said. He wrote me a letter before he died. He said you had copies of everything. Harold's expression grew grim. He opened a file cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. Robert came to see me 2 weeks before he died. He was weak, could barely walk, but he insisted on coming in person. He told me he was worried about David, said he'd overheard some concerning phone calls. He opened the folder and spread documents across his desk. This is Robert's will, the original. This is the trust document for the commercial property. These are instructions for the house sale, specifying that you were to receive all proceeds after paying off any remaining debts. And this, he pulled out a sealed envelope, is a letter Robert asked me to give you if anything seemed amiss with the estate settlement. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was another letter in Robert's handwriting. Maggie, if Harold is giving you this letter, it means my worst fears have come true. It means David has done something wrong. I've documented everything. Every account, every asset, every wish I have for how things should be distributed. Harold has copies of everything. Don't let David tell you I didn't plan, or that I didn't care what happened to you. You deserve to live comfortably for the rest of your life. The house sale alone should give you enough to buy a small home of your own and live independently. The commercial property income should supplement your social security nicely. Don't let David take what's rightfully yours. Fight, Maggie. For once in your life, don't just accept what someone tells you. Fight. I looked up at Harold, tears streaming down my face. He knew what David would do. Robert was a smart man, and he knew his son better than David probably realized. Harold pulled out more papers. Now, let's talk about what actually happened versus what should have happened. For the next hour, Harold went through everything. He showed me the accounting Robert had done, the actual value of the estate. Then he compared it to what David had told me. According to these papers you photographed, David had you sign a power of attorney giving him complete control over your finances. Did you understand what you were signing? I shook my head. He said it was just so he could help me with bills and paperwork while I was grieving. He said it was temporary. It wasn't temporary. With this power of attorney, David could do almost anything with your assets. Harold's voice was tight with controlled anger. He closed your joint accounts with Robert and transferred the money to accounts in his name. He sold the house and kept the proceeds. He transferred the commercial property out of the trust and into his personal ownership, which, by the way, violated the terms of the trust and Robert's will. Can we fix this? Lisa asked. Can we get back what he took? Harold leaned back in his chair. That's complicated. What David did was legally questionable and ethically reprehensible, but he covered his tracks well. The power of attorney gave him broad authority. However, he held up a finger. There are several problems with what he did. He started ticking off points. First, he violated the terms of Robert's trust. The commercial property was specifically designated to remain in trust for the benefit of all 4 heirs. David had no authority to transfer it to himself. Second, even with power of attorney, he had a fiduciary duty to act in your best interest. Taking hundreds of thousands of dollars for himself was not in your best interest. Third, some of these signatures. He pulled out the photos I'd taken, looked suspicious to me. I knew Robert for 50 years. This signature on the property transfer document doesn't look quite right. My heart skipped. You think David forged Robert's signature? I think it's worth having a handwriting expert look at it. If he did forge it, that's fraud. Criminal fraud. Emma leaned forward. Harold steepled his fingers. We could file a civil lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty and recovery of assets. That would take time and money, but we'd likely win. We could also report the suspected fraud to the police and let them investigate. Or, he paused, we could approach David directly and give him a chance to make this right before we take legal action. Why would we give him that chance? Lisa said, her voice hard. He doesn't deserve it. No, he doesn't, Harold agreed. But sometimes the threat of legal action is enough to get what you want without going through a long, expensive, public court battle. If David knows we have all this evidence, knows we're prepared to file charges, he might agree to return what he took. I thought about that. Part of me wanted to see David face justice, wanted him exposed and punished. But another part of me, the part that had raised him, that remembered him as a little boy, just wanted this to end. What do you think? Harold asked gently. This is your decision. I looked at Lisa, then at Emma, then back at Harold. I want a meeting. I want David, and I want my other children there too. I want him to look me in the eye and explain himself, and then I want him to give back what he took. Harold nodded. I can arrange that. But Maggie, you need to be prepared for the possibility that he'll refuse. That he'll deny everything, or try to justify what he did. Are you ready for that? I don't know, I said honestly. But Robert told me to fight, so that's what I'm going to do. Over the next 2 days, Harold made the arrangements. We scheduled a meeting at his office for Saturday morning. David agreed to come, but only after Harold told him we had evidence of fraud and were prepared to involve the police. Lisa stayed with me at Emma's house. We spent the evenings going over everything again, making sure we understood all the details. Tom finally called back from overseas, and when I told him everything, there was a long silence on the line. Mom, he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry. I should have been there. I should have checked on you. You're in the Navy, sweetheart. You're serving your country. This isn't your fault. David's my brother. I trusted him to take care of you. Tom's voice hardened. I've got leave coming up in 2 weeks. I'll be home, and David's going to answer to me for what he did. One confrontation at a time, I said, though part of me was grateful for Tom's loyalty. Friday night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the meeting, about what I would say to David. Emma heard me moving around and came to sit with me in the kitchen. You don't have to do this, she said gently. Harold could handle the whole thing. You don't have to face David if you're not ready. I need to do this, I said. I need him to know that I'm not the helpless, useless woman he thinks I am. I need him to see that his father knew what he was capable of, and that I'm not going to let him get away with it. Emma squeezed my hand. Robert would be proud of you. You know that, right? Tears filled my eyes. I hope so. I really hope so. Saturday morning arrived too quickly. Lisa helped me pick out an outfit. Not my usual comfortable clothes, but a tailored navy dress and blazer that made me look professional strong. I put on the pearl necklace Robert had given me for our 40th anniversary. You look like someone who means business, Lisa said approvingly. At Harold's office. We arrived 15 minutes early. Harold had set up the conference room with chairs arranged around a long table. He'd prepared folders for each of us containing copies of all the relevant documents. At exactly 10 o'clock, David arrived. He was alone. Vanessa hadn't come. He wore an expensive suit and an expression I couldn't quite read. When he saw me, something flickered across his face. Surprise? Anger? I couldn't tell. Mom, he said carefully. You're looking well. I didn't respond. I just took my seat at the table, Lisa on one side, Emma on the other. Harold sat at the head of the table, and David sat across from us. Harold opened his folder. David, thank you for coming. We're here to discuss the administration of Robert Daniels' estate and certain irregularities we've discovered. David's jaw tightened. I don't know what Mom's been telling you, but I handled everything according to Dad's wishes and with full legal authority. Did you? Harold's voice was mild, but there was steel underneath, because I have Robert's original will right here, and it doesn't match what actually happened. He slid a copy of the will across the table to David. According to this, your mother was to inherit the house and its sale proceeds. The commercial property was to remain in trust for the benefit of all four heirs. Yet somehow, you ended up with everything, and your mother ended up with $15,000. David didn't even look at the document. Dad's medical bills were extensive. The estate had debts. I did what I had to do to settle everything. The medical bills totaled $93,000, Harold said calmly. Even after paying those, there should have been over $600,000 remaining. Where did that money go, David? For the first time, David looked uncomfortable. Legal fees, estate taxes. It adds up. Show me the receipts, I said quietly. Everyone looked at me. David's eyes narrowed. What? Show me the receipts, the bills, the documentation of where every penny went. My voice was steady now, stronger. If you really spent $600,000 on legitimate expenses, you'll have records. David's face flushed. I don't have to prove anything to you. I had power of attorney. I made decisions I thought were best. Best for whom? Lisa's voice was sharp. Because they sure weren't best for Mom. You don't understand the pressure I was under, David said, his voice rising. Taking care of everything, managing all of Dad's affairs while you, he pointed at Lisa, were focused on your pregnancy and Tom was overseas. I did everything. I held this family together. By stealing from our mother. Lisa stood up, her chair scraping loudly. Be throwing her out of your house and calling her useless. I didn't steal anything. David slammed his hand on the table. Everything I did was legal. Legal isn't the same as right, I said quietly. David turned to me, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Was it shame? But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by defiance. Mom, you don't understand business. You never did. Dad left a mess, and I cleaned it up. You should be grateful. Grateful. The word came out louder than I intended. Grateful that you took everything your father worked for. Grateful that you made me feel worthless. Grateful that you planned to put me in a state, run nursing homes so you could keep every penny. David went pale. You went through my things. I went through my husband's papers, the ones you told me were donated. I leaned forward. I know what you did, David. And so does everyone in this room. The question is, what are you going to do about it now? The conference room felt like it had shrunk. David sat across from me, his face a mixture of anger and something that might have been fear. Harold had his hands folded calmly on the table, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Lisa was still standing, one hand protectively on her belly. Sit down. Lisa, I said gently. She hesitated, then lowered herself back into her chair. David ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from his childhood, something he did when he was cornered. You had no right to go through my garage. And you had no right to steal from your mother, Emma said quietly. It was the first time she'd spoken, and David seemed to notice her for the first time. Who the hell are you? I'm the person who took your mother in when you threw her out with nowhere to go. I'm a social worker who's seen elder abuse more times than I can count. And I'm someone who's going to make sure you face consequences for what you've done. David's face went red. Elder abuse. This is ridiculous. I took care of my mother for 6 months. I gave her a place to live. You verbally abused her, Emma interrupted. You made her feel worthless. You isolated her from resources and information. You exploited her financially. That's textbook elder abuse, Mr. Daniels. And in this state, it's a crime. Harold. David turned to the attorney, his voice taking on a pleading tone. You know this is crazy. Dad trusted me. He wanted me to handle things, tell them. Harold opened another folder and pulled out a document. Actually, David, Robert left very specific instructions about what he wanted. He also left a letter expressing concerns about your intentions. Would you like me to read it aloud? David's face went pale. I thought not. Harold leaned back in his chair. David, I'm going to lay this out very simply. We have evidence of fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and financial exploitation. We have Robert's original will showing that you violated his wishes. We have documents suggesting you may have forged signatures. We have testimony from your mother about emotional abuse. If we take this to court, and we will if we have to, you will lose. You will lose the lawsuit, you may face criminal charges, and you will definitely lose any relationship you have left with your family. You can't prove any of that, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. Can't we? Harold slid a stack of papers across the table. These are the documents Maggie photographed from your garage. These are copies of the real estate transaction showing the house sale price you hid from her. These are bank records showing transfers you never disclosed. This is the trust document for the commercial property that you violated. And this, he pulled out one more paper, is a preliminary analysis from a handwriting expert suggesting that Robert's signature on the property transfer was forged. I watched David's face as he looked at the papers. I saw the moment he realized he'd been caught. His shoulders sagged, his defiance crumbling. I was going to pay her back, he said quietly. When? Lisa's voice was harsh. After you put her in a nursing home. After you spent everything. The real estate market was down. I needed capital for a development deal. I thought I could make the money back, double it even, and then give Mom her share plus extra. David looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine emotion in his eyes. I wasn't trying to cheat you, Mom. I was trying to grow the money. By lying to me. By making me think I had nothing. By throwing me out of your house. My voice broke. David, even if that's true, even if you really planned to pay me back someday, you stole my dignity. You made me feel like I was nothing. I didn't mean. David's voice caught. I was stressed. The development deal was falling apart. Vanessa kept pushing me to make it work. I couldn't sleep. And you were just always there, reminding me that I was failing. So you took it out on me, I said softly. Your father had just died. I was grieving. And you took it out on me. David put his head in his hands. For a moment, he looked like the little boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee, the one who needed his mother. But I couldn't let that sway me. Not this time. Harold cleared his throat. David, here's what's going to happen. You have two choices. Choice one. You return all assets that rightfully belong to your mother. That includes the proceeds from the house sale, the life insurance payout, the savings account funds, and the commercial property transferred back into the family trust as Robert intended. You do this within 30 days, and we agree not to pursue criminal charges or a civil lawsuit. And choice two, David asked, his voice muffled by his hands. Choice two, we file a lawsuit on Monday morning. We also file a police report for fraud and forgery. This becomes public record. Your business reputation will be destroyed, and you will still have to return everything, plus legal fees, plus punitive damages. Oh, and your siblings will inherit their proper shares, which means you'll get nothing from your father's estate. David looked up, his eyes red. You'd destroy me. You destroyed yourself, Lisa said. Well, just making sure you face the consequences. David turned to me. Mom, please. I made mistakes. I know that. But I'm your son. Doesn't that count for something? I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about the years of raising him, the sacrifices Robert and I had made to give him opportunities. I thought about the little boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers, and I thought about the man who had called me useless and thrown me out. You're my son, I said quietly, and that's the only reason I'm giving you a choice at all. But David, you need to understand something. You didn't just take money from me. You took my dignity. You took my sense of safety. You made me question my worth. Money can be repaid. Trust can't. So what do you want? David asked, his voice barely a whisper. I want what's mine. I want the house money. I want the insurance payout. I want the commercial property back in the trust where your father intended it. And I want you to apologize to your brother and sister for lying to them. And if I do all that, I glanced at Harold, who nodded slightly. If you do all that, we won't pursue criminal charges. But David, I leaned forward. You and I are done. You won't be welcome in my life. I can't have someone around me who would treat me the way you did. Maybe someday, if you get help, if you really change, we can talk. But not now. Not for a long time. David's face crumpled. You're cutting me out of your life. You cut yourself out when you chose money over your mother. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on Harold's wall and David's ragged breathing. Finally, David nodded. Okay, I'll do it. I'll return everything. Harold pulled out another document. Then you'll sign this agreement. It specifies exactly what you're returning and the timeline. 30 days for the cash assets, 60 days for the property transfer. If you miss any deadline, the agreement is void and we proceed with legal action. Understood. David took the pen Harold offered and signed the document without reading it. His hand was shaking. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said as he set down the pen. "I really am sorry." I wanted to believe him. Part of me still wanted to reach across the table and tell him everything would be okay, the way I used to when he was small. But I couldn't. The trust was broken, and I didn't know if it could ever be repaired. "I hope you are," I said, "because you're going to have to live with what you did, and you're going to have to explain it to your children someday." David flinched at that. He stood up slowly, like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. "Can I?" "What?" "How did you know?" "About the garage, about the papers?" "I saw them," I said simply. "That night when you threw me out." I looked back, and I saw the boxes through the window. And I remembered that your father always said the truth has a way of coming to light. He was right. David nodded slowly. He looked at Lisa, who stared back at him with cold eyes. He looked at Emma, who regarded him with professional detachment. He looked at Harold, who simply waited. "I'll have the first transfer done by Monday," David said. Then he walked out of the conference room without looking back, after the door closed behind him. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My hands were shaking. Lisa reached over and grabbed one. Emma grabbed the other. "You did it, Mom," Lisa said. Tears stood up to him. "We did it," I corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this alone." Harold smiled. "Robert would be very proud of you, Maggie. You fought for yourself, just like he asked you to." "Will David really return everything?" I asked. "Or will he try to get out of it?" "He'll do it," Harold said confidently. "He knows the alternative is criminal prosecution. And despite everything, I don't think David wants to go to prison." "He's not a monster, Maggie. He's just a weak man who made terrible choices." I nodded, but I wasn't sure I agreed. What David had done took planning. It took deliberate cruelty. That was more than weakness, but it was done. The confrontation I'd been dreading was over. David had been exposed, and justice, or at least something close to it, would be served. As we left Harold's office, I felt exhausted but also lighter somehow. For the first time in 6 months, I could see a path forward. I would have my money back. I could find my own place to live. I could rebuild my life on my own terms. "What do you want to do now?" Emma asked as we walked to her car. I thought about that. What did I want to do? "I want to go see the house," I said suddenly. "The one Robert and I lived in for 40 years. I want to see it one more time." Lisa and Emma exchanged glances, then nodded. 20 minutes later, we pulled up in front of my old house. A young family lived there now. I could see a bike in the driveway, flowers in the garden that I used to tend. It looked happy. Lived in, loved. I sat in the car, looking at the front porch where Robert and I used to drink coffee on Sunday mornings. The window of the bedroom where I'd raised 3 children. The oak tree where we'd hung a tire swing. "Do you want to knock on the door?" Lisa asked gently. I shook my head. "No, it's not mine anymore. It's theirs now." I smiled, surprising myself. And that's okay. I don't need this house to remember Robert. I don't need anything to remember how much he loved me, how good our life was together. "Where will you live?" Emma asked. "Once David returns the money." "I don't know yet. Maybe a small condo, something easy to maintain. Somewhere with a garden." I looked at both of them. "But wherever it is, it will be mine. Mine and mine alone. No one to tell me I'm in the way. No one to make me feel small." Lisa squeezed my shoulder from the back seat. "You were never small, Mom. You were always strong. You just forgot for a while." As we drove away from the house, I realized she was right. I had been strong once. Strong enough to raise 3 children. Strong enough to support Robert through career changes and health scares. Strong enough to weather every storm life threw at us. I'd just forgotten. David had made me forget. But I was remembering now, and no one would ever make me forget again. 3 months later, I stood in the living room of my new condominium, watching the sun set through the large bay window. The space was modest. 2 bedrooms, one for me and one for when Lisa or Tom visited. But it was perfect. Clean, bright, and most importantly mine. The money from David had come through, just as Harold predicted. Every penny transferred in stages over the 60-day period. The commercial property had been returned to the family trust, with the income now split 4 ways as Robert had intended. I'd received over $600,000 in total, enough to buy this condo outright and still have a comfortable nest egg for the future. "Mom, where do you want this box?" Tom's voice called from the hallway. He'd arrived on leave 2 weeks ago and had barely left my side since. "The kitchen, sweetheart. That one has dishes." Tom appeared in the doorway, muscular and tanned in his navy uniform. He set the box down gently, then came to stand beside me at the window. "Nice view." "It is, isn't it?" I smiled up at my youngest child. "I can see the park from here. I'm thinking about volunteering at community garden." Tom was quiet for a moment. "Have you heard from David?" It was the question everyone had been afraid to ask. The answer was no. I hadn't heard from David since that day in Harold's office. Lisa told me that Vanessa had filed for divorce. Apparently, when the money troubles became public, she'd decided David wasn't worth the trouble. David had moved into a small apartment and was trying to rebuild his real estate business, but word had gotten around about what he'd done, and clients were scarce. Part of me felt sorry for him, but a larger part remembered standing on his porch with a suitcase, remembered the word useless, remembered the betrayal. "No," I said simply. "I haven't heard from him. Do you think you ever will? Forgive him, I mean." "I considered that, I know." "Tom, maybe someday. But forgiveness isn't the same as trust, and I don't know if I'll ever trust him again." Tom nodded. "He called me last week, said he wanted to explain, to make amends." "What did you tell him?" "I told him to leave you alone until you're ready." "If you're ever ready." Tom's jaw tightened. "He's my brother, and I love him, but what he did was unforgivable." "Nothing is unforgivable," I said quietly. "But some things take a very long time to get past." Emma arrived a few minutes later with pizza and wine. Lisa had wanted to come too, but she'd given birth to a healthy baby girl 2 weeks ago and was still recovering. I'd driven up to visit them in the hospital, had held my granddaughter and cried tears of joy. Lisa had named her Margaret Rose, Maggie for short. The 3 of us, Emma, Tom, and I, sat on the floor of my new living room, eating pizza from paper plates and drinking wine from coffee mugs because I hadn't unpacked the real glasses yet. "To new beginnings," Emma said, raising her mug. Tom and I echoed. "So what's next, Mom?" Tom asked. "You've got the condo, you've got your money back. What do you want to do with your life now?" It was a good question. For so long my life had been about other people, raising children, supporting Robert, trying to please David. Now, for the first time in decades, my life was my own. "I've been thinking about that." I said Emma mentioned that the senior center downtown is looking for volunteers. They have a program that helps elderly people recognize signs of financial abuse and exploitation. Emma smiled. "I might have mentioned you to the director. She'd love to meet you." "Really?" I felt a flutter of excitement. I think I'd like that. I'd like to help other people avoid what happened to me." "You'd be perfect for it," Emma said warmly. "You've lived through it. You know how easy it is to trust the wrong person, how hard it is to speak up. You could make a real difference." Over the next hour, as we unpacked boxes and assembled furniture, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Direction. Hope. My phone buzzed. A text from Lisa. "Maggie wants to say goodnight to Grandma." A second later, a photo appeared. My tiny granddaughter, wrapped in a pink blanket, eyes closed, one little fist by her face. I showed the photo to Tom and Emma, my eyes filling with tears. "She's perfect." "She is," Tom agreed. "And she's lucky to have you as a grandmother." That night, after Tom and Emma left, I stood in my bedroom unpacking the last few boxes. At the bottom of one, I found the framed photo of Robert and me on our wedding day. We looked so young, so full of hope and dreams. I set the photo on my nightstand and sat on the edge of my bed, looking at it. "I did it." I whispered to the photo. "I fought just like you asked me to." I stood up for myself. Of course, there was no answer, but I could almost hear Robert's voice in my head, proud and loving. "I never doubted you for a second, Maggie." Not for a second. The next morning, I woke up early and made coffee in my new kitchen. I sat at my small dining table and looked out at the park, watching joggers and dog walkers start their day. My phone rang. Harold Brennan. "Good morning, Maggie. I hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all. Is everything okay?" "More than okay. I wanted to let you know that the final paperwork for the trust has been processed. The commercial property is officially back in the family trust." And the income distribution starts next month. You should see about $4,000 deposited into your account on the first of each month. $4,000 a month, plus my social security. I'd be more than comfortable. I'd be independent. Harold for everything. It was my pleasure. And Maggie, Robert would be so proud of you. You honored his memory by standing up for yourself. After we hung up, I sat with those words. Would Robert be proud? I thought about the letter he'd left me, the one where he'd called me the strongest woman he'd ever known. Maybe he'd seen something in me that I hadn't seen in myself. Maybe it had been there all along, just buried under years of putting everyone else first. A week later, I had my first meeting at the senior center. The director, an energetic woman named Patricia, showed me around the facility. There was a community room where seniors gathered for activities, a small library, a kitchen where cooking classes were held. This is our education room, Patricia said, opening a door to a classroom-style space. This is where we hold our financial literacy and fraud prevention workshops. We usually get about 20 to 30 people per session. I looked at the chairs arranged in rows, at the whiteboard at the front of the room. I imagined standing there, telling my story, helping others recognize the warning signs I'd missed. When can I start? I asked. Patricia smiled. How about next Tuesday? That Tuesday? I stood in front of a room full of seniors, men and women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Some looked worried, some skeptical, some just curious. My name is Margaret Daniels. I began, my voice surprisingly steady. And I'm here to tell you about the time my own son stole everything from me, and how I got it back. For the next hour, I told my story. I didn't leave anything out. Not the way David had treated me, not the pain of being called useless, not the fear of having nowhere to go. But I also told them about the fight back, about Emma and Lisa and Harold, about standing up in that conference room and demanding what was rightfully mine. When I finished, the room was silent. Then an elderly man in the back raised his hand. My daughter has power of attorney over my finances, he said quietly. She says it's to help me, but I never see statements anymore. I don't know what's in my accounts. That's a red flag, I said gently. Power of attorney is supposed to help you, not hide information from you. You have every right to see your own financial statements. A woman near the front spoke up. My son keeps telling me I should sell my house and move in with him. He says he'll invest the money for me. But something doesn't feel right. We talked for another 30 minutes after my presentation was supposed to end. Person after person shared their concerns, their fears, their suspicions. And I listened, and I advised, and I shared the resources that Emma and Harold had taught me about. When everyone finally left, Patricia came up to me with tears in her eyes. Maggie, that was incredible. Do you know how many people you might have just saved from what you went through? I thought about that. If even one person in that room recognized the warning signs and protected themselves, if even one family had a conversation about elder abuse because of my story, then everything I'd been through would have meaning. I'd like to come back, I said. If you'll have me. Every Tuesday, Patricia said immediately. And I'm going to see about getting you a small stipend. This is important work, Maggie. Over the next few months, my life found a rhythm. Tuesday mornings at the senior center. Wednesday afternoons volunteering at the community garden. Friday evenings were for dinner with Emma, who had become one of my dearest friends. And weekends were often spent visiting Lisa and baby Maggie, or video chatting with Tom when he was back on his ship. I bought new furniture for my condo. I took a painting class at the community college. I went to the theater and out to dinner and to book clubs. I did all the things I'd been too busy or too timid to do before. And slowly, I realized something. I was happy, genuinely deeply happy. One evening in late spring, 6 months after moving into my condo, I was sitting on my small balcony watching the sunset when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mom? David's voice was hesitant, almost fearful. Please don't hang up. I sat there, my finger hovering over the end call button. Part of me wanted to hang up, to maintain the boundary I'd set, but another part, the part that had raised him, that had loved him for 42 years, couldn't quite do it. What do you want? David. I wanted you to know that I started seeing a therapist. A real one, not just for show. We've been working on understanding why I did what I did. Why I treated you that way. I didn't respond. I waited. I was angry, David continued, his voice breaking. Angry at Dad for dying, angry at myself for not being successful enough, angry at the world. And I took it out on you because you were there, because you were safe. Because I knew deep down that you loved me no matter what. He paused. I was wrong. And I crossed every one of them. Yes, I said quietly. You did. I'm not calling to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. I'm calling to tell you that I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. And I'm calling to tell you that you were right. What I did was unforgivable. But I'm trying to be better, to become someone who might someday deserve a second chance. I closed my eyes, feeling the warm spring air on my face. David, I appreciate you calling, I do. But I'm not ready to have you in my life again. Maybe someday, but not now. I understand. His voice was thick with tears. Can I call again in a few months? Just to let you know how I'm doing. I thought about that. Yes, you can call. But David, I need you to understand something. Even if I forgive you someday, things will never be the way they were. You can't undo what you did. You can only try to be better going forward. I know. I'm trying, Mom. I'm really trying. After we hung up, I sat on the balcony for a long time, watching the stars come out. I didn't know if David would really change. I didn't know if our relationship could ever be repaired. But I knew something else, whether he changed or not. I was going to be okay. Because I'd learned the most important lesson of my life. I'd learned that my worth wasn't determined by how others treated me. It wasn't measured by how useful I was or how much I sacrificed. My worth was inherent, unshakable mine. Robert had known that. He'd tried to teach me, tried to show me. But I'd had to learn it myself the hard way. A year after moving into my condo, the senior center held a small ceremony. They were giving me an award for my volunteer work, Outstanding Community Advocate for Elder Rights. Lisa came, 8-month-old Maggie on her hip. Tom flew in on leave. Emma was there, of course, sitting in the front row. Harold came, and Patricia and dozens of the seniors I'd worked with over the past year. As I stood at the podium, holding the plaque, I looked out at all these people who had become my community, my support system, my friends. A year and a half ago, I said, my son called me useless. And for a while, I believed him. But then I discovered something in a garage, not just documents, but evidence that I was worth fighting for. That my life, my dignity, my future mattered. I paused, looking at the faces in the crowd. If there's one thing I want you all to take away from my story, it's this: you are never useless. You are never too old to start over. You are never too beaten down to stand back up. And you are never, ever alone. The applause that followed was thunderous. Baby Maggie clapped her tiny hands together, not understanding but joining in any way. Lisa was crying. Tom was grinning with pride. And I felt, for the first time since Robert died, complete. That night, back in my condo, I took out Robert's letter, the long one he'd written before he died. I'd read it dozens of times, but I read it again now, seeing new meaning in his words. You're the strongest woman I've ever known, he'd written. He was right. I just hadn't known it yet. I walked to my desk and pulled out a piece of paper. I'd started writing things down lately. My story, my experiences, lessons I'd learned. Maybe someday I'd turn it into something more, a book or a guide for others going through what I'd been through. I picked up my pen and wrote, My name is Margaret Daniels. I am 68 years old. I am a mother, a grandmother, a widow, a friend, and a survivor. I have been betrayed by someone I trusted, but I have also been lifted up by strangers who became family. I have lost everything and rebuilt from nothing. I have learned that my worth is not determined by others, but by myself. And I have learned, most importantly, that it is never too late to start over. It is never too late to fight for yourself. It is never too late to come home. Outside my window, the city lights twinkled in the darkness. Somewhere out there, David was living his life, hopefully learning to be better. Lisa was tucking baby Maggie into bed. Tom was serving his country with honor. Emma was helping another person in need. And I was here, in my own home, living my own life, on my own terms. I was no longer the woman who had stood on that porch with a suitcase, broken and lost. I was Margaret Daniels, and I was finally truly free.